A new report just revealed something very startling about the city of Toronto. Over 35,000 families left the GTA last year, packing up their lives and heading for new chapters elsewhere. This is more than 1% of all GTA households. And it's not limited to one part of the city or one demographic. It spans all income levels, all neighborhoods. In this video, I'm going to break down why people are leaving, where they're going, and what it means for the future of Toronto, using the latest data from Environics Analytics and some firsthand stories from the media. We're going to trace this affordability crunch, safety, and school concerns. And we're going to talk about the drive or even fly till you qualify effect that is fueling this migration. And yes, obviously, Toronto's population historically has been booming, masking a lot of these losses. But with Ontario now seeing the largest outflow of non-permanent residents ever in history, these changes could have lasting impacts on the province, the city of Toronto, and especially the real estate asset class. So let's start from the top here. 35,000 households left the GTA last year. This new Environics data reported by CP24 shows that 35,000 GTA households moved to other parts of Canada from 2024 to 2025. By contrast, nearly 250,000 moves took place within the GTA to another part of Toronto or the GTA. So the outflow itself was a significant net shift. The most popular places that people are going are either nearby cheaper markets, so Simcoe County, Hamilton, and then all the way to Calgary. Simcoe County alone accounts for over 10% of these moves, far above any other region, thanks to lower prices and space, and probably the GO train line from Barrie and Bradford into Toronto. Now, experts obviously would call this the drive till you qualify phenomena. Families are largely moving farther out to afford a home. And studies show that this migration trend has been building for decades. Over the past 4 years, Toronto lost 45,000 residents to the rest of Ontario. Peel region lost about 37,000. And now the leading reasons for this are very clear: housing costs and space, safety, quality of life, and childcare and school issues. And we're going to share a couple of real quotes and stories illustrating each driver. One Toronto mom admitted a $750,000 mortgage obviously would make her feel house poor, so they finally left. Right. Now, let's unpack the data a little bit here, and let's also dive into one of the key costs, which is that, and CMHC recently called out the Toronto government on this, showing that development charges are highest in the city of Toronto and the highest across the GTA. You know, the cities that are behind the GTA, this is for development charges per apartment unit by municipality in 2025. You got the city of Toronto, followed by Markham, Brampton, Mississauga, Newmarket, Aurora, Pickering. Basically, the top 10 are all GTA. You go to your single family detached units by municipality, which we're not building a ton of these, so I don't know how much it matters, but you've got City of Toronto and Markham both leading the charge at $180,000 in development charges if you want to build a brand new house. And as the buyer of that brand new house, you're the one absorbing that cost. And in this report, I really think that, CMHC really just put the city of Toronto on display here in the madness that they're really doing with this development charge policy. They're so high that they're literally killing rental construction. They're killing condo launches. They're killing affordability. The feds cut taxes, right? HST on new builds and purpose-built rentals. The province did the same thing, but municipalities are actually increasing one of the biggest cost drivers of housing. And I'm going to do a whole video on this. I'm going to do an interview with CMHC's chief economist when I get a chance, Matthew Leberge, who wrote the report. So stay tuned for that. Now, the outflow data that we're talking about here isn't an anomaly, right? The long-term data reveals that Toronto has been losing people to nearby regions for years. Before the pandemic even began, the city was losing over 15 residents per 1,000 people to other parts of Ontario each year, which is a net loss of about 45,000 residents to other Ontario regions. So this is a slow moving exodus as people can't afford to or starting to suburbanize. They're leaving the city of Toronto. The most common reason is obviously affordability and space. Even families with good incomes are priced out. There was an example of an individual here who felt that their annual income of $200,000, which would qualify them for a $750,000 mortgage, would give them a stable life in the city of Toronto. And she realized that that number was a trap, not an opportunity, right? Because it would have left them house poor with a young child, and they wanted a detached home and stability, and Toronto simply couldn't offer it without extreme debt. So as rents rose and the basement apartment was lost, they left, moving 300 kilometers to Chatham, Ontario. I don't know if you guys know where Chatham is, but it's pretty far away. It's down by Windsor. Great little part of the country, by the way. Lots of farms and stuff like that. I mean, you'd be able to go to see the Red Wings play instead of the Leafs, I suppose, which would maybe be a bit of a pick me up. Mike Moffat's done a lot of good research on this, basically showing that young people, mostly young families, are leaving Toronto. So mostly young people, children especially. He has a table that shows the number of children leaving each city. Like it was a growth in population under the age of 5, I think. So you can see the interprovincial migration from Ontario economic regions. Toronto is really the one that's seeing most of the decline. The rest are actually growing, and they're probably growing as a net benefit from people leaving Toronto going into those areas. The other chart I mentioned that he mentioned here is proportion of kids under 5 years old, and then Toronto interprovincial out migrants under the age of 5. So people leaving the city of Toronto, and there's been a huge decrease or negative number of people. The number of people, children basically, leaving the city of Toronto has gone from 2,000 to 9,000. And that was his last reading was 2021, but I'd love to see updated data on from Mike on this. Now, I wish it was just economics and financial reasons, because it would be a lot easier for me to report on that without starting fights in my comments. But safety and quality of life are another huge pressure. There was a dad from South Etobicoke in this article who mentioned that basically you feel very unprotected in Toronto these days, and it pushed them north to the Horseshoe Valley, Oro-Medonte area, where they were warmly welcomed by neighbors. Education and childcare also a factor when the recent school boundary changes threatened to bus young kids far from home. A lot of Toronto families chose to relocate their children so they could stay in local schools. One North York family moved to London, Ontario to be near relatives in a stable school routine. And these stories underscore a broader point here, that Toronto's housing crunch isn't just about money. It affects everyday family life. Driving till you qualify has become a necessity for a lot of people. Realtors and urban planners and economists use this phrase to describe how buyers are pushed farther out along highways or GO train lines in search of affordability. And with Toronto prices so high, as well as factors like safety and quality of life, there's a lot of the things in the articles, a lot of the anecdotes talk about like urban open drug use and stuff like that. The concept of suburbanizing seems to make a lot of sense, right? So it would seem contradictory that Toronto's population is still growing pretty rapidly, but tens of thousands of people are leaving. And the reason for this is immigration, right? Between 2022 and 2023, Toronto's metro area added like 250,000 people. Obviously we've come down quite a bit from that. And I think 2025 numbers are probably going to shock quite a few people. I am of the opinion that the populations are actually falling in a lot of places. As mentioned in the chart that I put here, that Ontario has basically seen this net outflow of net non-permanent residents. Where are they going to be leaving from? Toronto and the GTA. That's where a lot of those international students were living. A lot of the temporary foreign workers were living. If they're leaving, or if they're not leaving, based on some of the other videos that I've posted, and we're actually just failing to account for them properly, they would be leaving the greater Toronto area. But a lot of people land in Toronto and then leave eventually because they just simply can't afford it. It's very hard to make the economics of living in the city of Toronto make sense. So the dual dynamic has big implications. On one hand, the housing market feels super tight, right? Homes are expensive. Many long-term Torontonians feel squeezed out. On the other hand, politicians often point to population growth, the demand curve, and ignore the reshuffling underneath. But the reality is that planning properly for schools, transit, other infrastructure in the suburbs is now as important as the core, because thousands of families are relocating. And this really goes back to the demographic issue that I think Canada is facing, where we've had this problem with Canadians not having kids. Middle class people don't want to have children. And this isn't just in Canada. This is very much a thing around the world. I mean, China pulled a billion people into the middle class, and then their birth rate fell basically from like 3 to below 2. And so the idea that Toronto is booming, I would say, is only half the story. The data that recently came out would tell us that Toronto is bleeding residents at a historic rate. More than 35,000 households have left for other communities. in the last year, driven by an affordability crisis, safety and school concerns, and the search for more family-friendly living. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. I know a lot of people who watch these are from the GTA or Toronto. Do you live in an urban area? Do you plan to live there forever? Do you have kids? I'm just curious to get your take. Like I don't really know how the average person feels about this stuff, so I try and rely on data to formulate my opinions, but in a lot of cases it's limited, obviously, right? It's very clinical. So let me know what you think. And as always, thanks a lot for taking the time to watch this video. I'll get you another one as soon as I can.